Welcome to 10-Minute Magic, a weekly format covering news in the world of Magic the Gathering, brought to you by the minds behind Draw4 Podcast. I am Joseph Dunlap.
And I am Ben Cotty. And this is what's going on in Magic the Gathering this week. There was a Forbes article called Diversity is the Marketing Strategy. So off the back of lots of negative articles last year on sort of women's place in Magic by some very high profile women in the game and content producers, Magic 2016 seems to have been the rebound effect from all of this. We've had Gabby Sparks on coverage for 2 GPs. We've had more writers on the mothership. We've had high-profile content producers, the Girlfriend Bracket and Magic the Amateuring, sort of upping their game and their content levels. The Girlfriend Bracket were involved in the Streamer Showdown yesterday, and I think women were in all the finals and winning the Streamer Showdowns, I believe. And this article kind of highlights the grab for the untapped player base, which could grow the game into its next stage. If you just have to look around Tournament Magic and see that women are not as high profile as Magic in number of players, and it's just this huge untapped resource that Wizards seem to be making much of it more of a play for. And this article seems to suggest by the comments within it also that it's more of an open secret now as well.
In Magic Online, there is an issue. Mir Superion is bugged. And it's a big problem. LSV called it Mecha Goyf on Twitter, but the problem is that you are able to cast it for 2 mana of any type of mana. It ignores the restriction on being required to be produced by creatures. Instead of fixing the bug, Wizards of the Coast is just threatening to ban people for abusing the bug. A few pro players have joked, oh yeah, go ahead and play Mir Superion, it's the best 2-drop in the format, and so forth. But that's what's going on in Magic Online. Do not abuse Mir Superion, or you will be banned.
And Sperling will definitely be sick of it. And in Innistrad news, it's who is the big baddie? Is it Emrakul? General thinking seems to be, God, I hope not more Eldrazi. Is it just Nahiri being bonkers? Is Bolas at play? Or the growing suspicion that Marit Lage has come all the way from Cold Snap to visit Innistrad? Or is it just Avacyn being bonkers? We might find out this set. We might find out, I think, more in Eldritch Moon, as so far the spoilers, whilst they've been awesome, they seem to have kept it very much to the original Innistrad setting, so I expect Eldritch Moon to be the departure that really blows things open. I love the Angel Civil War storyline, the Nahiri Sorin mad at each other with sword dueling subplot, and the mysteries that Jason Tamio are all tracking.
In the past week, we've seen quite a few reveals. In spoiler season for Shadows over Innistrad, we've seen vampires, werewolves, investigate synergy, cool flip cards at all rarities, including a land that turns into an indestructible flyer, a new version of Olivia Valdarian that's quite fun, and 4 planeswalkers all in this set, Nahiri, Arlencord, and Sorin.
Yep, and all the walkers, everybody seems to feel are exactly alike. They all gain you card advantage with a plus, they all kill something with a minus, and then they all have their ultimate. Is this just the bog standard templating we're going to see moving forward?
Some people have compared the new Sorin to Ob Nixilis, almost exactly the same, and hopefully this is just the direction they're wanting Standard to go rather than just going with basic templating, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And that is the news in Magic the Gathering this week. In recent weeks, there were several well-received articles on Manaleak.com with some insightful comments from our readers that we wanted to read out.
Yep, so first there was 10 great tips to help improve at Magic the Gathering immediately by Graham McIntyre. So this wasn't one of those fluffy kind of articles, it was 10 really specific things you could look at doing straight away that would really up your game. I know I've been guilty in the past of 8 and 9, which was stop getting defensive, making excuses, and don't argue, discuss, because I like to think I was always right when I was at the peak of my game. But number 10 is really the one that's most important in my Magic career right now, which is to think about your time and prioritize the things you care about, because with limited time as a family man, I really have to knuckle down and put my Magic playing time into what I really need to accomplish. As well as these 10 things, really the comments started to pick up a very sort of 11th one, I would guess, that was straight away, which Magic players will know as the acronym RTFC, which I won't spell out on this family-friendly podcast. Dan Long mentioned, can you add read the card? Even as a casual player, there are way too many players who think they know what the card says, but when they actually read it, and hand in hand with that is, when there is a rules question, just get the answer, and when in doubt, call a judge.
Interestingly enough, I've often had even L2 judges mention to me in conversation that often, if there's a question about a card, Not a, real complicated GP level interaction, but just a question about how a card works. They say, "Judge, how does this card work?" The judge will then proceed to read the text on the card, and the player says, "Okay, thanks."
Yep. Yeah.
So another comment on this article by Trevor Caldwell. He says, "These are a lot of helpful hints for people who are trying to get into competitive but have a rough time of it. One piece of advice I would add, however, is an obvious one, but one that should still be brought up, and that's to read the cards correctly. Seems like a theme. I've played far too many games that could have turned out very differently if either I or my opponent had just read the cards correctly. It could be misunderstanding what it does and causing a misplay, such as not understanding that a certain card doesn't tap to activate an ability, but the ability taps the card, and so forth. Another big tip is to pay attention very closely to triggers. Again, a lot of games he's played could have ended differently just by paying close attention to triggers. It actually helps to list out and even say each step as they happen, so you can remember when your face triggers go off. I would add to that, if you're not currently playing Magic Online or one of the emulators, it's a good idea to do. It might cause you at some point early on in testing to get complacent with your paper triggers, but it will teach you more about how triggers work, how the stack works, and how the turns work.
Yeah, and it was one of the great changes to Magic when they made players have to pay attention to all of their triggers and that the opponent didn't have to remind you anymore. So the common theme, everybody, is read Graham McIntyre's article and then read the cards.
Moving right along is an article that I put up on Menelik not too long ago, and it was the featured article on the most recent episode of Draw 4 Podcast. Is it ethical for Magic the Gathering pro players to expect their opponents to concede before the top 8 of a Grand Prix?
Yep, and Eric Froehlich's article spoke an unspoken truth, I guess, but it was the tone of the piece overall that really seemed to strike a nerve.
Yeah, because my article was based very much in part on Eric Froehlich's article, which was outlining the way that pro players view the concession standpoint.
Yeah, and Zach Stackhouse kind of helped summarize this. He said, "I'm a bit torn on unintentional draws. If I find myself X and 1 going into a final round where a draw would mathematically guarantee me a top 8 spot, and the other guy is in the same position, I'd offer it to ID. I realise that this may cost someone a spot, but I'm looking out for number 1 in the situation. That being said, I found Froehlich's account distasteful. A player has every right to refuse an ID, or in this context a concession, for any reason whatsoever, and to even hint that there would be some sort of consequence for refusing crosses an ethical border in my mind. I blatantly reject the notion that a pro has earned preferential treatment. It makes a GP feel more like a political event than a competition of skill, with an entertaining element of luck added in. Make your deals, shake some hands, and make sure you can just ID to top 8 as soon as possible. It feels too organised to me. You may well have shave a round or two and spare us all the time."
I found that very interesting, a lot of the points he makes there. He says, first off, I look out for number 1. I make sure I can make it to the top 8, but then he completely hones in on the idea that the pro-playing community will just have each other's backs as a community rather than on a group of friends, which is something I talk about in my article as well. And the idea that when you, in part, fix the top 8, it basically just becomes a political event where the pro players hang out and wait for their top 8 spot to open up, and then and everyone else just sort of has a good time playing F&M. Now, it may not be 100% accurate of what actually occurs, but it is a fair point to say that that is how a lot of players view it.
Yep.
I'm going to finish off by reading the beginning of a comment from reader Kevin Moore. It was quite a long comment, but the beginning of it was the most pointed part of it. He says, "Let's say you have a close personal friend who, if you beat, gets booted from the top 8. They call that dream crushing. That would be a very difficult ethical challenge. I would hardly blame someone in that situation from conceding to their friend. I can even understand someone who invests a massive amount of time, effort, and money into getting a top 8 spot not wanting to jeopardize that in the future by making enemies. However, that doesn't change the argument that it violates the spirit of the competition. That point has been made by so many people. We talked about that on Draw 4 Podcast very recently, about the moral ambiguity behind, if you're in this situation, it's one thing. If you're not, it's another thing entirely. And it has to do with your viewpoint.
Yep, and it's just a great summary. People are passionate about this piece. People recognise that it's a thing that happens and won't go away, but maybe just don't really want people to talk about it at the end of the day and highlight the sort of distasteful, if that's the word that a lot of people have used, of that distasteful part of the top end of tournament Magic, I guess.
Well, Ben, thanks for joining me here on the first episode of 10 Minute Magic. It's been great recapping the news and so forth. And thank you all, listeners everywhere, for joining us.
Yeah, it was great bringing this to all you listeners. As this is our first time out, we are really keen to get any feedback on the presentation, format, the amount of time we've run through, because the idea is to keep this to 10 minutes of magic. So yeah, really get back to us. We'll listen to all of it and take it all on board.
This has been 10 Minute Magic from Joseph Dunlap and Ben Cotty, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.